Before I'm starting, I would like to say a few words as an appreciation for whatever Rabbi Barakan is doing, because I must say that I'm following his activities in Riga for a couple of years, and I do believe that what Rabbi Barakan is doing here is unique in the world, because it's a private initiative, and he devoting his life for this project. And whenever I'm going to speak about the Holocaust, I am mentioning the name of Rabbi Barakan as a sample for a huge and unique project how to memorize what's happened. So before we start, we must applaud to Rabbi Barakan for whatever he is doing on the last 10 years. He is unique, and I do believe that he will continue. And thanks to him, everybody who is coming can see and understand more and more what's happened here in Riga, in Latvia, in Soviet countries during the years 1939, 1945. So Rabbi Barakan, kol hakavod. You are part of it. Without Victoria, I can't do anything. Usually I'm speaking, without papers, but it's a very short while, so I will try to read it and to express a few ideas, my ideas, maybe some other people's ideas about what's going on in connecting to the Holocaust. I must, maybe I will say it later, but I must say before I'm starting that for the last 6 years, I'm the founder and the director of Elie Wiesel Archive at Boston University in the United States. And Elie Wiesel Archive is unique in the world. Even today, we have already 1 million documents. So I feel that I can say something about the Holocaust, because even you have a huge collection all over the world about the Holocaust, a private collection of over 250,000 documents on the Holocaust is unique. It's not an organization, it's a private man, it's a part of his archive, and sometimes, and it's happened very often, that the document on the Elie Wiesel Archive is unique in the world. So he received testimonies, witnesses, that nobody else has it on his collection. So I would like to open with 2 sentences that were spoken, one before the Holocaust and the other after it. 2 sentences that I believe are truly tied to each other, despite having been separating by time and place. As I said, for the 6 years I have managed the archives of the author, philosopher, and teacher, Holocaust survivor, Professor Elie Wiesel. In this enormous archive at Boston University in the United States, there are over 1 million documents, of which at least 1/4 deal with the Holocaust of European Jews. Above all these documents echoes Wiesel's word, for the sake of the future, it is imperative to bear witness. Not all the victims were Jewish, but all the Jews were victims. Wiesel made in his life mission to bear witness to the testimonies of the millions of his people who were annihilated. Speaking of his special importance of testimony, stood here in Riga one of the great Jewish historians, Shimon Dubnov, who shortly before being shot by Nazi soldiers, who was also his former students, Dubnov turned to his people, to his Jews around him, and pleaded. And I hope that everybody of you knows what he said. Dubnov said, "Do not stop writing about what are you seeing and what is being done to you. Don't stop writing. Writing is your mission. Dubnov and Wiesel, the one who was killed and the one who survived, knew that the Holocaust is the worst catastrophe that's ever befell the Jewish people. It is no wonder that Dubnov was and still is Wiesel's hero in all that pertains to writing the history of the people of Israel. It is Dubnov that Wiesel wrote and spoke of more than any other historian. Dubnov from Riga. And Wiesel mentioned many times, there is one city in the world that I'm interested to go, is to Riga. Unfortunately, he will not arrive to this place anymore. One of the goals of the major powers that started the war, Germany, was to complete annihilation of the Jewish people. Hitler's instruction, given close to his death, and he said, "Do not stop destroying the Jews," still echoes today throughout the pages of the history of all humanity. Germany perceived the Jewish people as the enemy, defined them as the enemy, targeted them as an enemy, and exterminated them as the enemy. About 6 million Jews in Europe and North Africa were killed between the years 1939 and 1945. Were they murdered only because they were Jewish? The answer is absolutely yes. There is no other or additional reason for which millions of Jews lost their lives. It is customary to define the Jews who were killed in the Holocaust as victims, and indeed they were victims of the hatred against them that accelerated the persecution and the destruction in practice in large areas across Europe, victims of the weakness and idleness of nations and leaders who abandoned them, those who saw them as brothers in arms, citizens who became victims. I would like to first talk a little bit about the fate of the million of the Jews. In the conquered countries, Jews were gathered, deceived, stripped their honors, starved, imprisoned in ghettos, and obliterated. In that war, for the first time in history, the victorious powers, with no limits to its capabilities, chose to fight the helpless in order to annihilate them using the modern solution of the death industry. 70 years after the end of the war that changed the face of the world, and of which the Holocaust was the absolute worst humanistic result, we are gathered here to discuss the various aspects of the Holocaust. I do not wish by any means to change the topics of the discussion. There is no reason for that. I only wish to reattribute the term Holocaust and the events associated with it to the Jewish history. There was a war, a terrible war, in which tens of millions were killed and murdered. 6 million of them were Jews. 6 million to whom the word Holocaust was dedicated. This is not the place to discuss the question who was the first to coin the term Holocaust to describe the fate of Europe's Jews. Based on research, it can be determined that it was founded first on December 11, 1938, with regard to the destruction that befell German Jewry on the Kristallnacht. It can be assumed that this is indeed the first time in which this term appears in the context of the persecution of the Jews under the Nazi rules in such an explicit and accounted way. Therefore, it is important to determine more or less the time span of the beginning of the Holocaust. 4 years ago, only 4 years ago, Professor Alvin Rosenfeld published his book, The End of the Holocaust. I hope that each of you, if you can read English or Hebrew or French, read this book, The End of the Holocaust. It's a very, very important book. Rosenfeld, from the United States, a world-renowned researcher, wished to show that 70 years after the Holocaust of the European Jewry, already the term Holocaust has lost its power and designation, and that its numerous uses have diminished its meaning and position. Rosenfeld's assertion takes me back to the words written by one of the first Holocaust researchers, Philip Friedman, who some perceived to be the first Holocaust researchers. Friedman wrote, "We are missing the history of the people of Israel during the Nazi regime, in which the Jewish people will stand in the center not just as a tortured people, but as a complete public entity, including the numerous and diverse discoveries within it. Our approach," he wrote, "our approach should be Judeo-centric and not Nazi-centric, because most of the research is about the Nazi and not about the Jews. The Holocaust harmed first and foremost the Jewish people, the people as Wiesel described, all of whom were victims. However, in the last 20 years, and to a greater extent in the last 10 years, the word and the term Holocaust are losing their values and this designation. I would like to say that almost every major disaster is defined as a Holocaust. Few samples. A quick internet search shows that today the word Holocaust is associated with various issues. For an example, Armenian Holocaust, ecological Holocaust, demographic Holocaust, zoological Holocaust. Recently, for an example, we have come across the description of the sites in Nepal following the major earthquake that called the event a disaster and the Holocaust for the people in Nepal. I would like to bring back the term Holocaust to the description of the fate of the European Jews during the years 1939-1945. I feel it is time to do away with the Holocaust-like comparison and use the term as it originally meant over 75 years ago. Not every major disaster, and unfortunately we are well experienced in various disasters, can and should be called Holocaust. Not everything is Holocaust. Holocaust belonged to the fate of the Jews during the Second World War. This task of returning the word Holocaust to describing the sad, painful and tragic demise of European Jews should be carried out by higher education institutions, by researchers who prepare the future generation of those who will handle the important topic, by teachers who teach the subject in school. And I know that in Latvia, this subject, as part of the Rabbi Barakan effort, this subject is part of the teaching curriculum, at least in major part of the schools. It is necessary, and in my opinion imperative, to isolate the misfortune of Europe's Jews from the other topics related to the Second World War. The universal themes are a part of the world's culture today, and it is well that it's so. However, the specific theme stemming from the fate of the European Jews is not sufficiently embedded in human thought and awareness, and the events in the past 2 years prove so. It is time to return to the basic, to the original significance, and to deduce from them action for familiarizing and teaching the topic of the Holocaust and its implication. What are the missions of colleges and universities as I see them? I would like to pose questions that seemingly face every Jew, but that have to be asked also by anyone who is not Jewish. The discussion is a Jewish realm is essentially subjective, yet this discussion, surprising the Jewish realm into the general one, is naturally more objective. I find that there is a tremendous difference between teaching about the Holocaust and trying to understand, and most often without success, that which has occurred during those horrific days. The importance of this topic is derived both from the need and necessity of our generation to shape the memories, as well from the obligation to prevent, as much as possible, the future possibility of the questioning and doubting of the occurring of the Holocaust. There are many, too many, and there is no need to elaborate on this point, who make every effort, and you know them, those who are making every effort to deny the Holocaust, to repudiate its more occurrence, to contradict the numerous testimonials that have accumulated. I had tens, if not hundreds, of conversations with Elie Wiesel. And if there is one thing that's bothered him more than anything else, it is the possibility one day that the masses, and not just individuals, will deny the existence of the Holocaust and will claim that the whole thing is the Jewish invention. And believe me, this is one of the main problems, the denials of the Holocaust. And we must fight against those people. 10 years from now, there will be no longer one survivor among us. One will not be in life. And then, God forbid, will start the big journey of those who will want to organize the rebuttal of the occurrence of the event known as the Holocaust. 10 years from now, many people, as we know now, will start the big battle to deny the Holocaust. A world war has occurred even too, that no one will try to deny. However, the fact that 6 million Jews were murdered and annihilated, that is what they will try to vanish from the pages of the history. And they will do whatever they can do in order to delete those papers, even from your internet computer. They will try to do everything in order to deny the Holocaust. It is the utmost priority of the higher education institution to prevent the future possibilities of denial of the Holocaust, to prevent the disappearance of the documentation, to prevent the possibility of researchers to saying that there is nothing more to research, to prevent the possibility of someone saying they should have killed all the Jews, and it is too bad that not all of them were eradicated. To prevent this possibility that humanity will not arrive at the appropriate conclusion regarding human existence, and particularly Jewish existence. I see the universities that prepare the future generation, that form future thinking patterns, that determine the level and essence of the knowledge carried by their graduates. I see them as the carriers of the Jewish Holocaust message. Do not be tempted to constantly deal with the universal lesson. Those were already defined and are the subjects of tens, hundreds, and possibly even thousands of books. In order to prevent another Holocaust of any form, it is necessary to deal with the Jewish history. I repeat, to deal with the Jewish history, not with the whole events during the Second World War. We are dealing with the Holocaust and the meaning of the word Holocaust. Yes, I realize that not everyone likes this. Not everyone likes the Jews. Not everyone sees the Holocaust as such as a terrible disaster. However, if there is anyone who can put things right, it is the researchers and educators who teach this subject. Yet, definitely, not only they. One does not have to be an Holocaust researcher or an historian in order to handle this subject. Every scholar can approach it within his or her field. The laboratory researchers and the literature researcher, the linguistic and the theological, the economist and the political scientist. The Holocaust can be researched from every academic angle. But it must not be that a student completes his or her studies without having that topic come up for discussion, at least for discussion, at one point or another. Dealing with the Holocaust is an occupation for all fields of life, and I don't need to expand on it. The research aspect of the Holocaust is a mission for humanity in general, and to the future of the Jewish people in particular. I support the teaching of the Holocaust as a chapter that is integrated into another or other academically taught chapters. Elie Wiesel said more than once that the Holocaust is so special that it divides from the history. As you know, we are very close to what we are calling Shavuot, the holiday, which is coming at the end of the week. And this is the day of when we receive the Bible, the Torah. And Wiesel used to say that the Holocaust was the second time as the Mount Sinai event. This is the second time. And as we remember the first time, we must remember and discuss the second time. The Holocaust must be tied not only to Jewish history, but also to the history of other nations as well. It is my aspiration that the topic will exceed its narrow field into the whole academic realm. The study of the Holocaust raises questions, for an example, regarding the place of the Jews in European societies. Another subject might be the thought process, ideas and morality of European societies. Still another approach will be the basic differences between the Jewish political perception and those of modern perception and myth. The discourse on the Holocaust should provoke thought on humans in general, but not less, and in my opinion even more so, on the Jewish people. It is that the term Holocaust be reassociated with the Jewish world and their fate during the Second World War, and choose to give leverage to discussions of topics that may be related to it, but that devoid on its meaning. The Holocaust has befallen the Jewish people. Elie Wiesel once told me, the term Holocaust is used too often. The holiness of the horrific terms should be revered. Believe it or not, we must take the word Holocaust back to the Jewish fate during the Second World War. If we will not do it, it will be too late that the people and the nation and the countries and the societies will remember the 6 million Jews that were killed during those 6 years, 1939-1945. Holocaust belonged to the Jews. Remember it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now, Yoel, just a moment. Maybe someone has some questions.
Please.
Do you have questions? Welcome.
Everybody agree?
I'm sorry. Everybody agree. Everything is clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.